let's talk about academic writing. For a lot of people, it feels like this mysterious, kind of intimidating art form. But what if we treated it like what it actually is? A skill you can learn with a clear set of rules. Today, we're going to lay out the blueprint for building clear, credible, and really powerful research papers. Right? This is the question that's on everyone's mind when they start out. It can feel like there's this secret code, some hidden rule book that you're just supposed to know. Well, the good news is there isn't one. The rules are surprisingly straightforward, and in this explainer, we're going to walk through them step by step. So, here's our game plan. First, we'll lay the foundation. What even is academic writing? Then we'll look at the core principles. Think of these as your building materials. After that, we'll get into the IMRID blueprint, which is like the universal framework for your project. From there, we'll talk about the actual construction, and we'll wrap up with a final inspection of common mistakes and my top tips. Okay, first things first. Before we can build anything, we need to understand the ground we're building on. So let's define exactly what we mean when we talk about academic writing. What's its whole purpose? Here's the bottom line. Its number one goal is clear communication. That's it. This isn't about writing beautiful, creative prose. It's all about getting complex ideas and research findings across in a way that is totally unambiguous and, crucially, backed by evidence. It's the language of scientific journals and theses for one simple reason. It's built to be understood. So, if clear communication is the goal, what are the building materials we need to actually get there? Let's take a look at the core principles that really define this style of writing. Now, what's really interesting here is how scientific writing is basically a specialized version of academic writing. See, on the left, you've got the broad principles for any academic work. It's got to be formal, objective, and based on evidence. But when you shift over to the sciences on the right, that focus gets way sharper. The demand for absolute precision, for concise language, for reproducible data, it becomes even more intense. It's not a different rule book, it's just a much more rigorous game. And now for the part that is a total game changer for so many people, the framework itself. In the scientific world, there's a nearly universal structure called IMRAD. And trust me, it's the gold standard for organizing your research. And you can just see how logical this is, right? You start with the introduction. What's the problem and why should anyone care? Then you move to methods. What exactly did you do? This part has to be so clear that another scientist could repeat your experiment perfectly. Next up, results. What did you find? This is just the raw data. No opinions, no interpretation just yet. And finally, the discussion. So what? What does it all mean? This is where you get to connect all the dots and tie your findings back to that original problem. Okay, so we have our foundation, we've got our materials, and now we have the framework. So, how do we actually start building this thing? Let's walk through the actual construction process, from a totally blank page to a finished manuscript. And would you look at that? Write the manuscript is step 5. That's so important. The real heavy lifting happens way before you even think about writing full paragraphs. It all starts with a good topic, a deep dive into what's already known, designing a really solid study, and then digging into the data. The writing part is really just assembling all those carefully prepared pieces, which of course is followed by that absolutely critical final polish of editing and proofreading. Okay, let's just pause on this for a second because this is huge. In this entire construction process, there is one rule that is absolutely non-negotiable: citing your sources. It's not just about staying out of trouble, It's about showing you've done your homework and respectfully placing your work within the bigger scientific conversation. Think of it this way. Every single citation is like a thread that connects your work to this vast web of human knowledge. It is truly the ethical backbone of all research. Now, you're going to run into a few different languages for citation depending on your field. These are some of the heavy hitters. You don't need to memorize all of them, but you absolutely have to master the one required by your school or the journal you're submitting to. Consistency here is everything. All right, the paper is built. Now it's time for the final inspection. This is where we put on our hard hats, grab a clipboard, and check for any structural weaknesses to make sure this thing is polished and ready to go. These right here are the classic cracks in the foundation. Plagiarism, even if it's accidental, can be a disaster. A lack of clarity, well, that defeats the whole point of writing the paper in the first place. Poor organization or super complex sentences will just make your reader give up. And incorrect citations, well, they just show a lack of attention to detail. These are the traps that can sink even the most brilliant research. So, how do we fix those cracks and make sure our structure is solid? The solutions are pretty direct.
Aim for clarity above all else. Simple, direct language is almost always stronger. If you make a claim, you have to back it up with data or a citation. Every single time. Never ever underestimate the power of revision. And a great pro tip, read your work out loud. Finally, always, always, always follow the specific submission guidelines. It matters.
So if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. Good academic writing isn't about using big, fancy words to sound smart. It's a skill built on 3 pillars: clarity, accuracy, and logic. That solid structure we talked about, it isn't a cage holding you back. It's the platform that gives your ideas the credibility and the reach they deserve. And that really brings us to the final and most important question. You did the research, you have the data. Your idea is important. This blueprint isn't just a boring set of rules. It's a powerful tool to help you share that idea with the world, clearly and with confidence. So the only question left is, how are you going to use it?